Tell me, have you ever given too much, only to be ignored? Have you sacrificed for someone, only to be treated as if you were nothing? This is the problem we will solve: why kindness, when unchecked, weakens your power, erodes respect, and eventually destroys your relationships. Kindness is often praised as the highest virtue. People say, if you give more, people will love you more. But Machiavelli, who observed the raw truth of human nature, would tell you that this is nothing but a dangerous illusion. For generosity, when carried to excess, does not create loyalty, it creates hunger, and the hunger of others, once awakened, will never be satisfied. Think of it this way: when you are constantly giving, constantly serving, constantly sacrificing, you believe you are building trust and security. You believe that the other person will look at your kindness and say, here is someone I must value. Here is someone I must never betray. But reality is far harsher. Human beings are wired to desire more than they have. If you feed this desire endlessly, it does not breed gratitude. It breeds expectation. What was once seen as a gift soon becomes seen as your duty. At first, they may thank you. At first, they may shower you with admiration. But wait, and you will notice the shift. No longer are your actions received with awe. They are received with assumption. You are no longer a giver, you are merely a provider. And when you fail to provide, when you hold back even slightly, they will not remember the hundreds of times you gave. They will remember only the one time you did not. This is the paradox of over-giving. It plants the seeds of resentment rather than loyalty. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler who spends too freely to win affection eventually finds himself hated when the flow of gifts must stop. Why? Because the people grow addicted to his generosity. They no longer love the ruler, they love his treasure. And when that treasure runs dry, so too does their loyalty. Translate this into personal life, into friendships, into love, and the truth is the same. When your kindness becomes excessive, it no longer creates love. It creates dependence. And dependence, when frustrated, quickly turns into bitterness. Imagine a relationship where one partner is always giving time, attention, money, forgiveness. At first, this generosity feels warm, it feels noble. But soon, the other partner begins to expect it. They come to believe that this is simply the way things are meant to be. And when one day the giver says no, when one day they decide to withhold, even for a moment, the entire relationship begins to shake. Because what was once extraordinary has become ordinary, and the absence of it feels like betrayal. This is the tragedy of being too kind. It is not that people are evil, it is that people are forgetful. Gratitude has no memory. Once satisfied, the human mind immediately seeks the next favor, the next benefit, the next indulgence. And when you fail to meet this unending appetite, your once praised generosity becomes irrelevant. People forget the mountain of sacrifices you made, and they focus on the single stone you did not give. Machiavelli would tell you this. The nature of man is to be ungrateful. To expect loyalty in return for kindness is to gamble against human nature itself, and human nature does not lose. This is why rulers who govern with excessive mercy are toppled. This is why leaders who are too generous end up despised. And this is why in relationships, those who give too much are often the first to be abandoned. Kindness, when measured, strengthens bonds. But kindness, when poured without limit, strips you of power. It makes you predictable, it makes you weak, and it convinces others that your role is to serve, not to be respected. There is a harsh reality that few dare to confront. When something is given too often, its value begins to disappear. The same wine that is savored when poured sparingly becomes tasteless when consumed daily. Machiavelli knew this truth well, for he observed that men lose appreciation for what is always available. And in relationships, the same principle destroys the very foundation of respect. Too much kindness, too much softness, too much generosity, what once inspired admiration soon invites contempt. In the beginning, when you show kindness, people notice. They see your effort, your thoughtfulness, and they respond with gratitude. But the human heart is fickle. Once it grows accustomed to comfort, it no longer treasures it. The same gesture, repeated too often, ceases to be extraordinary and instead becomes expected. It is no longer seen as a privilege, but as a right. And here lies the problem. What is expected can no longer be admired. Imagine this in a personal relationship. The first time you forgive someone for their mistake, they are grateful. They marvel at your mercy. The second time, they are thankful, though perhaps a little less surprised. But the third, the fourth, the fifth time, suddenly forgiveness is not seen as a gift, but as your natural response. They assume you will always bend, always yield, always forgive. What once earned you respect now robs you of it. They no longer fear losing your trust because they believe your kindness is endless. And when fear is absent, so too is respect. Machiavelli would argue that men are not naturally respectful. They are trained into respect by scarcity and consequence. That which is rare is revered. That which is common is discarded. When a ruler is merciful only at precise moments, his mercy is valued. But when he is merciful at all times, his mercy becomes worthless and even dangerous, for it emboldens rebellion. Translate this into love or friendship, and the truth is identical. If you are always available, always accommodating, always soft, then your presence ceases to command value. You are no longer seen as a treasure to be kept. You are seen as furniture, useful but invisible. Consider how admiration works in the human psyche. We admire that which we feel we could lose. We admire that which carries weight and cost. Diamonds are treasured not because they sparkle, but because they are scarce. If the ground were littered with diamonds, they would be treated like stones, walked over without a second thought. The same logic governs human relationships. If your time, attention, and kindness are given without measure, they lose their scarcity, and thus they lose their worth. This is why many who are endlessly kind find themselves unappreciated. They believe that constant giving will secure them loyalty. But the opposite happens. Their value decreases with every act of unchecked generosity. People begin to look past them, treating their sacrifices as ordinary, as expected. And soon, contempt begins to grow, not because the kindness was hated, but because it became invisible. Machiavelli teaches us that people's hearts are easily corrupted by abundance. He observed rulers who gave everything to please their citizens, only to be despised when their resources diminished. In relationships, the same pattern emerges. A friend who is always there to help is rarely respected as much as the one who helps selectively. A partner who constantly sacrifices is often less valued than the one who gives rarely but decisively. For the first is ordinary, while the second feels exceptional. Thus, familiarity is dangerous. When people know they can always access your kindness, when they can always depend on your forgiveness, when they can always take your loyalty for granted, they stop seeing you as someone special. They begin to assume that your role is simply to give, and their role is to receive. They no longer admire you, they use you. And once admiration is gone, contempt quietly replaces it. There is a harsh reality that few dare to confront. When something is given too often, its value begins to disappear. The same wine that is savored when poured sparingly becomes tasteless when consumed daily. Machiavelli knew this truth well, for he observed that men lose appreciation for what is always available. And in relationships, the same principle destroys the very foundation of respect. Too much kindness, too much softness, too much generosity, what once inspired admiration soon invites contempt. In the beginning, when you show kindness, people notice. They see your effort, your thoughtfulness, and they respond with gratitude. But the human heart is fickle. Once it grows accustomed to comfort, it no longer treasures it. The same gesture, repeated too often, ceases to be extraordinary and instead becomes expected. It is no longer seen as a privilege, but as a right. And here lies the problem. What is expected can no longer be admired. Imagine this in a personal relationship. The first time you forgive someone for their mistake, they are grateful. They marvel at your mercy. The second time, they are thankful, though perhaps a little less surprised. But the third, the fourth, the fifth time, suddenly, forgiveness is not seen as a gift, but as your natural response. They assume you will always bend, always yield, always forgive. What once earned you respect now robs you of it. They no longer fear losing your trust, because they believe your kindness is endless. And when fear is absent, so too is respect. Machiavelli would argue that men are not naturally respectful. They are trained into respect by scarcity and consequence. That which is rare is revered. That which is common is discarded. When a ruler is merciful only at precise moments, his mercy is valued. But when he is merciful at all times, his mercy becomes worthless and even dangerous, for it emboldens rebellion. Translate this into love or friendship, and the truth is identical if you are always available, always accommodating, always soft. Then your presence ceases to command value. You are no longer seen as a treasure to be kept. You are seen as furniture, useful but invisible. Consider how admiration works in the human psyche. We admire that which we feel we could lose. We admire that which carries weight and cost. Diamonds are treasured not because they sparkle, but because they are scarce. If the ground were littered with diamonds, they would be treated like stones, walked over without a second thought. The same logic governs human relationships. If your time, attention, and kindness are given without measure, they lose their scarcity, and thus they lose their worth. This is why many who are endlessly kind find themselves unappreciated. They believe that constant giving will secure them loyalty. But the opposite happens. Their value decreases with every act of unchecked generosity. People begin to look past them, treating their sacrifices as ordinary, as expected. And soon, contempt begins to grow, not because the kindness was hated, but because it became invisible. Machiavelli teaches us that people's hearts are easily corrupted by abundance. He observed rulers who gave everything to please their citizens, only to be despised when their resources diminished. In relationships, the same pattern emerges. A friend who is always there to help is rarely respected as much as the one who helps selectively. A partner who constantly sacrifices is often less valued than the one who gives rarely but decisively. For the first is ordinary, while the second feels exceptional. Thus, familiarity is dangerous. When people know they can always access your kindness, when they can always depend on your forgiveness, when they can always take your loyalty for granted, they stop seeing you as someone special. They begin to assume that your role is simply to give, and their role is to receive. They no longer admire you, they use you. And once admiration is gone, contempt quietly replaces it. Gratitude is a mask. It is worn by people when it benefits them, when it flatters them, when it allows them to remain in your good favor. But do not be deceived. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that the gratitude of men is shallow, temporary, and often false. People will smile at you, praise you, and swear loyalty while your kindness serves their interests. But the moment your generosity ceases to benefit them, the mask falls away, and what lies beneath is indifference, or worse, betrayal. This is the most painful truth about excessive kindness. It blinds you to the real intentions of others. You believe their gratitude is genuine. You believe their loyalty is eternal. You believe that because you have given them much, they will never turn against you. But Machiavelli would tell you, men are ungrateful, fickle, simulators, dissemblers, avoiders of danger, eager for gain. Their gratitude does not come from loyalty, it comes from convenience. And convenience has no memory. Imagine this in a friendship. You are always there, always helping, always making sacrifices. The other person smiles, thanks you, and calls you a true friend. But the day you cannot give, the day you withhold, even for reasons beyond your control, the story changes. Suddenly, you are accused of neglect. Suddenly, your years of loyalty vanish from their memory. The mask of gratitude slips, and you see the truth. They were never attached to you. They were attached to your usefulness. This is why Machiavelli warns that a ruler who tries to win loyalty through kindness alone is destined for ruin. His subjects will wear the mask of devotion as long as his hand is generous. But when the treasury empties, when the gifts stop flowing, he will see their true faces. They will abandon him for the next ruler who offers more. They will not remember his past kindness. They will remember only their present dissatisfaction. In relationships, this dynamic is no different. The lover who once adored your sacrifices may one day grow cold when those sacrifices no longer serve their desires. The friend who once praised your generosity may drift away the moment you no longer give. Human nature is not nourished by gratitude, it is nourished by self-interest. This is why those who rely solely on kindness are repeatedly disappointed. They mistake temporary gratitude for permanent loyalty. They mistake politeness for devotion. They mistake need for affection. And then, when the mask falls, they feel betrayed. But betrayal was always there. It was simply hidden behind the performance of gratitude. Consider how quickly admiration fades when giving stops. The same people who praised your generosity may be the first to speak against you when you can no longer provide. They may even resent you, for they feel entitled to what you once gave freely. And entitlement is the enemy of gratitude. What was once received as a gift is now demanded as a right. So when it is withheld, people feel cheated, not thankful. Machiavelli would say that wise leaders and wise individuals must never be fooled by appearances. Gratitude is an appearance. It is a costume people wear when they depend on you and discard when they do not. If you base your strength on this illusion, you will one day discover that you stand alone. For gratitude is not loyalty. Loyalty endures beyond self-interest. Gratitude vanishes the moment self-interest shifts. And so, in every human connection, whether love, friendship, or power, remember that the face of gratitude cannot be trusted. Look not at the words people speak when they receive from you, but at their actions when you withhold. That is when the truth emerges. That is when the mask of gratitude falls, and you see whether there is loyalty beneath it, or only emptiness. Machiavelli teaches us that mercy without measure is weakness, but mercy applied with calculation becomes power. Too often, people believe that to maintain relationships they must always be warm, always be forgiving, always be available. Yet the opposite is true. It is not endless softness that secures loyalty and respect, but rather the careful use of distance, silence, and even coldness. To be strategically cold is to remind others that your kindness is not guaranteed, that your presence is not permanent, and that your favor is not free. When people know that you will always be there, they begin to value you less. They no longer fear losing you, because in their mind, you cannot be lost. But introduce a measure of coldness, perhaps a silence where once there was constant response, or a refusal where once there was endless agreement, and suddenly their perception changes. They are reminded that your kindness is not owed, it is chosen, and what is chosen can also be withdrawn. Machiavelli observed that rulers who were always merciful eventually inspired rebellion, for their subjects knew there would be no consequence. But the ruler who was merciful at times and ruthless at others created both fear and gratitude in balance. His mercy was valued because it was rare. His kindness was remembered because it was not constant. So too in personal relationships. If you are always forgiving, forgiveness becomes expected. But if you forgive rarely, and with reason, forgiveness feels like a gift, one that carries true weight. Strategic coldness is not cruelty. It is discipline. It is the ability to step back when others expect you to bend. It is the refusal to indulge every request, to accommodate every demand, to comfort every offense. This form of restraint does not push people away, it draws them closer because it reintroduces scarcity into the relationship. Scarcity is what creates value. Your attention becomes precious when it is not always available. Your kindness becomes powerful when it is not guaranteed. Think of how people behave when they sense distance. A friend who took your time for granted may suddenly grow anxious when you no longer answer immediately. A partner who assumed your patience was infinite may suddenly change their behavior when you do not forgive so easily. Strategic coldness forces people to recognize that your kindness is conditional and that conditions must be respected if they wish to keep it. Machiavelli would remind us that love without fear collapses into contempt. If people are certain that your affection, your forgiveness, and your loyalty will always be theirs, they will eventually test its limits. They will see how far they can push before you break. But when they know that your favor can vanish, when they feel the chill of your absence, they are more cautious, more respectful, and more devoted. This is why rulers used both fear and love to govern, not one alone. Fear without love creates rebellion. Love without fear creates neglect. But when the two are combined, subjects remain loyal, for they desire the ruler's approval yet fear his withdrawal. In relationships, the same duality applies. If you are only warm, you are taken for granted. If you are only cold, you are pushed away. But if you can blend warmth with strategic distance, you become unforgettable. Strategic coldness also protects you from exploitation. Those who seek only to drain you, to use your kindness without end, will reveal themselves when you pull away. Watch how people react when you say no. Watch how they respond when you create distance. If they grow hostile, if they vanish, if they show resentment, then they were never loyal to you. They were loyal only to what you provided. But those who respect your boundaries, who value you even when you withhold, these are the ones who truly see your worth. To practice strategic coldness is to master the art of timing, knowing when to give and when to withhold, when to forgive and when to punish, when to be present and when to disappear. This rhythm is what maintains power and respect. Too much of one destroys the other. The wise person does not drown others in constant kindness, but neither do they suffocate with endless severity. They create contrast. They remind others that every gesture carries weight, that every act of generosity has meaning precisely because it is not constant. One of the most dangerous consequences of excessive kindness is that it breeds dependence. At first, dependence may appear flattering. You may think, they cannot live without me. They need me. This means I am important to them. But Machiavelli would caution you to look deeper, for dependence is rarely born out of true loyalty. It is born out of convenience. And what begins as dependence soon transforms into exploitation. When you are always there to solve problems, others stop learning to solve problems themselves. When you are always giving, others stop seeking ways to give in return. They fall into the habit of leaning on you, not because they respect you, but because you allow it. And soon, they begin to believe it is your role to carry them, to support them, to supply them with what they lack. Your kindness becomes their expectation. Your sacrifice becomes their entitlement. Think of the ruler who feeds his people endlessly, who provides gifts, favors, and protection without end. At first, the people cheer his name. They call him generous, they call him noble. But as time passes, they no longer see these acts as generosity. They see them as duties. And when the ruler cannot give as much, or when he dares to withhold, the people turn on him with anger. What once brought him admiration now brings him hatred, for their dependence has grown into a demand, and every demand that is not met becomes a reason for resentment. This same truth plays out in personal life. A friend who knows you will always pay the bill stops reaching for their own wallet. A partner who knows you will always forgive stops controlling their behavior. A colleague who knows you will always pick up their slack stops carrying their own weight. And when you finally draw the line, when you finally say no, they react with shock, even rage. They accuse you of being selfish, of being cruel, as if your years of kindness meant nothing. Why? Because dependence has turned into exploitation, and exploitation, once denied, breeds hostility. Machiavelli understood the nature of men. They do not love those who give endlessly. They exploit them. And the more you allow yourself to be used, the more boldly people will use you. If you never set limits, they will never set limits for themselves. Instead of being respected for your generosity, you become resented the moment you refuse to serve. Dependence robs you of dignity, and exploitation strips you of power. It is important to see how subtle this transformation is. No one begins by saying, "I will exploit this person." It starts with small requests. A favor here, a small sacrifice there. You say yes, and they thank you. But the requests grow larger, and your yes becomes automatic. Slowly, the thanks fade, replaced by expectation. Soon, you are no longer choosing to give. You are trapped in the role of the giver. And once trapped, every refusal you make will be seen as betrayal. This is why excessive kindness is so dangerous. It builds a prison around you, a prison constructed from the needs of others, where every wall is made of your own sacrifices. Machiavelli would advise that generosity must be controlled, rationed, and used with precision. Give too much, and you are no longer admired, you are consumed. Show too much patience, and you are no longer respected, you are abused. Those who learn they can always depend on you will not love you more. They will strip you of more. For dependence is not love, it is leverage. And leverage in the wrong hands is always used to exploit. When people discover that they can drain you without consequence, they will not stop themselves. They will continue until you are empty, and even then, they will demand more. And once you cannot give, once your strength runs out, they will not look at you with compassion. They will turn away, seeking the next person to exploit. This is the cruel truth Machiavelli revealed. Human loyalty is fragile, and kindness, if unchecked, does not bind people to you. It makes you a tool, and tools are discarded when they break. Machiavelli never argued for cruelty without cause, nor for kindness without restraint. His wisdom lies in balance, the delicate art of wielding both generosity and severity, not as opposites, but as tools to be used with precision, to be feared and loved in equal measure, to be admired yet respected. This is the Machiavellian balance. And in relationships, this balance determines whether your bonds endure or collapse under the weight of excess. When kindness becomes endless, it is stripped of power. When severity becomes constant, it hardens into tyranny. But when the two are combined, when they are applied with intelligence and timing, they create stability. The people respect a ruler who shows mercy at the right moment, but they also fear him enough to never exploit that mercy. A friend values your generosity when they know it is not automatic. A partner cherishes your forgiveness when they know it is not infinite. The power of balance is that it makes every gesture meaningful, every decision unforgettable. Imagine a leader who is only harsh. His subjects obey, but they obey with hatred, waiting for the first chance to overthrow him. Now imagine a leader who is only kind. His subjects praise him, but they praise him while draining his resources, mocking his weakness behind his back, and abandoning him the moment his kindness no longer satisfies them. Both extremes invite destruction, but the leader who combines mercy with fear, who shows kindness sparingly and strength consistently, commands both loyalty and caution. His people love him when he gives, but they do not dare take him for granted. The same law governs every personal connection. If you are only soft, you will be exploited. If you are only cold, you will be rejected. But if you can master the rhythm of both, kindness at times, firmness at others, you become someone impossible to ignore. Your kindness is remembered because it is not constant. Your firmness is respected because it is not blind cruelty. It is the mixture, the unpredictability that gives you presence. Machiavelli understood that the world does not reward those who are entirely good. In his words, a man who tries to be good in all things is destined to be ruined among so many who are not good. This does not mean abandoning kindness. It means controlling it, shaping it, using it when it strengthens you rather than weakens you. To be generous at the right time earns loyalty. To withhold generosity when it would drain you earns respect. Both are necessary. Without one, the other collapses. Consider how admiration works. If you give endlessly, no one remembers your generosity, for it is expected. But if you give at the right moment, after restraint, after silence, after firmness, your generosity becomes memorable. It becomes a story retold, a mark of your strength rather than a symbol of your weakness. Forgiveness, too, follows the same rule. Forgive always, and forgiveness becomes meaningless. Forgive selectively, and forgiveness feels profound. Balance transforms your actions from ordinary to extraordinary. The Machiavellian balance also protects you from those who seek only to exploit. When you mix kindness with authority, people know that your favor has limits. They cannot manipulate you endlessly because they feel the edge of your boundaries. They cannot drain you without consequence because they sense that your patience is not infinite. They know you can be kind, but they also know you can be cold. And it is this knowledge that keeps relationships stable. Balance requires discipline. It demands that you resist the urge to give constantly, to forgive automatically, to indulge endlessly. It also demands that you resist the temptation to rule with only severity, with only distance, with only ruthlessness. For either extreme is destructive. Discipline means choosing your moments with care. It means knowing that the power of kindness is multiplied by its rarity, and the power of firmness is softened by its contrast. Without calculation, both are wasted. This is why Machiavelli's teachings remain eternal. He knew that human nature bends not to pure affection, nor to pure fear, but to the careful combination of both. The ruler who masters this balance is secure. The individual who practices this balance in relationships is respected. To wield generosity as a weapon, to use kindness as a tool of strength, to apply coldness when it is necessary, and warmth when it is effective. That is the art of the Machiavellian balance. And so, we return to the warning of Niccolò Machiavelli. Kindness, when unguarded and excessive, becomes a chain around your own neck. The world is not built on the gentle promises of goodwill, but on the raw contest of power, respect, and balance. When you give too freely, you invite contempt. When you make yourself endlessly available, you erase the mystery that sustains desire. When you forgive every offense, you empower betrayal. The great mistake of those who are too kind is believing that kindness alone can hold together loyalty, love, or respect. It cannot, for human nature is fickle, drawn not to the weak hand that offers endlessly, but to the firm hand that knows when to give, when to deny, and when to walk away. Machiavelli's counsel is not to strip kindness from your heart, but to wield it as one wields a sword, with precision, intention, and restraint. Be kind where it strengthens your position, where it deepens loyalty, where it creates advantage. But never allow kindness to consume your authority, for then it ceases to be virtue and becomes your undoing. If you learn to balance mercy with discipline, warmth with distance, and generosity with firmness, your relationships will not rot under the weight of your softness. Instead, they will be held together by respect, desire, and an unspoken recognition that your kindness is a choice, not a weakness. This is the eternal truth. The world respects not those who give without limit, but those who give wisely, sparingly, and from a position of strength.